Hey everybody, it is another edition of A Triangle Live from the I'm a Triangle community. We are here today with a really fun guest. Melody Warnick is the author of a book that I cannot wait to talk to you about. Just a couple of quick reminders that if you are watching this live, you can comment, you can engage, we see your comments. We're going to be giving away some books, so you're going to want to watch for that question and that call out so that you can try and be a lucky winner. We'll be giving either hardback versions for those of you that are in the United States or digital copies for anyone who's international outside of the United States. So we are glad you're here. If you are watching live, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. If you're watching the replay, we get to have those same conversations with you as if it were live. So feel free to shout out and tell us where you are coming from. So Melody, how are you?
I'm great. I'm really excited to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so fun. You know, we were talking about place and identity and how to love the place that you live, and your book kept coming up on repeat in the group, and so I'm excited to have you here. Can you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'm one of those people who didn't start out as a mover. Grew up in Southern California, never moved from my block ever until I went away to college. But when I was done with college, I got married and my husband and I started moving. We moved to Maryland, to Utah, to Iowa, to Texas, and about 5 years ago landed in Blacksburg, Virginia. And they were always for very good reasons, moved for jobs, moved to get closer to family, moved to get farther away from family. But after a while, moving itself kind of became the habit. And I started paying attention to what it took in a new town to feel at home, to feel like this is where you wanted to be, to feel connected to a community there. And it led me down a path of research into a concept called place attachment, which is that emotional bond you develop with the place that you live. And I wanted that for myself in my new town in Virginia. And so I started writing This Is Where You Belong to be a guide for people who move a lot, who are trying to feel more rooted, and to sort of talk about what that means for us and how we can get there.
So one of the things that we've moved internationally, and I want to point out that it doesn't matter where you move or if it's inside of one country. A move is a move, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that's something that's important to share, that you don't have to move across the ocean for a move to be difficult or for that important placemaking to happen.
Yeah, definitely. All my moves have been in the United States. And I think certainly moving outside of the United States ratchets up the intensity of trying to settle into a new community where the culture is different, where you may not speak the language. That certainly complicates things. Those basic elements of place attachment, the things that make us feel happy where we live, to kind of fall in love with our town, I think are the same internationally and universally. And so I think they're especially important for people who are moving abroad to understand, because they can feel isolated sometimes, and like they lack a community.
Yeah. We have Kathy here, and she just said moving became a habit. She loves it. She's totally feeling that same thing right now.
Right. Yeah. I think one thing that I found in myself, I moved to Blacksburg, Virginia, and I had this idea in my mind that something about moving to a new city would make my life better. It would solve all my problems. I would be a different person. There's very much a sense of magical thinking that goes into moves sometimes. We really look to a new place and a fresh start to wipe the slate clean and make life good. And that's what I was expecting when I moved to Blacksburg, which is a small college town in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. You know, I thought, this is going to be my personal Mayberry. We're going to sit on the porch and we're going to drink our lemonade and everything's going to be great. And I moved here, and almost immediately I thought, I don't really like it. It was very southern, which was foreign to me. The terrain was very different than I was used to. It was very mountainous, and I was coming from flat places. And I think when you're a mover, when you're one of those people who kind of chronically moves, your reaction to that tends to be, well, we'll just move again, like, let's just find a new place. This one didn't work. Check it off the list and move on. And I realized that a lot of how we feel about where we live depends on us. It comes from our actions and behaviors in our town. So that's what I realized I needed to change. I didn't want to keep moving for the sake of moving. I didn't want to pay those therapy bills for my kids for so many years. So I needed to learn how to feel attached. And I needed to figure out how to do that.
So Allison is joining us, and we also have Sarah from the UK. Allison says, I've moved several times over the last few years, so I know the drill. But this last move I found harder, and I'm trying to figure out why. So Allison, we're glad you're here, and I think that you'll have some good takeaways as we go along. So Melody, one of the things that I really loved was mobile, being stuck, and being rooted. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, so this is a concept I learned from the sociologist Richard Florida, who writes a lot about place. So he divides America into three kinds of people, like you mentioned. First is mobile, and those are people who, for jobs or schooling or whatever, are just not very settled. They're moving every few years. Then you have people who are stuck, meaning that they've probably lived in the same place for a while, but they don't love it there. They would escape if they could, but they feel trapped by circumstances like family or jobs or things like that. The third category is where we want to be. That's rooted. And rooted people are ones who may have been in their town for a long time. They may be relatively new, but the idea is that you're choosing it, that you want to be there and you're happy with it. So being rooted doesn't necessarily mean that you're from this place, you're a native, you've been there for 25 years. I think you can feel rooted in a place, even if you've only been there a few months. It really is more of a state of mind and a state of choosing to be happy where you are.
Yeah, so Tom gives you 2 thumbs up on that. I think that's true. And I think that is, we talk about it all the time in the Triangle community about, are we doing our kids a disservice when we move them all over the place? Are we, what is it doing to us to not be rooted? And I think to flip that thought process and say that it can be a choice and it doesn't have to correlate just with the length of time that you're somewhere. I think that's a really important thing. And it's something, it might take some of our members and our viewers a little while to let that sink in, because we typically say rooted as in relation to years and years.
An amount of time. And there is research that shows place attachment peaks over time. It peaks after about 5 years. So there is a time element to it. It can be hard to feel rooted when you're brand new in a place. But at the same time, I feel like when you're moving a lot, and especially a lot of your members are people who are moving overseas for jobs, you may not always have ultimate control about when or where you move. But what you do have control over are the things that you do in that place to build a sense of place and to build a sense of community. And when you look at it like that, moving can actually be a boon for your family. If you're working hard to establish a sense of place and a sense of community in multiple places all over the world, that's fantastic. You're giving your child the sense that they can fall in love with all kinds of cities, with all kinds of cultures, and build their own community no matter where they are. And that's a great skill to have in today's world.
Yeah, it really is. So we talked at the beginning about a book giveaway, and I wanted to just let our people that are tuning in know about that. The way to be entered into the drawing is to answer in the comments this question. If you moved from your current location tomorrow, what would you miss the most? Think about sounds, tastes, smells, etc. So that's the question we want you to answer in the comments. And then at the end of the broadcast, we'll be drawing for either digital for those that are outside of the US or hardbacks for those that are in. Melody, let's talk about that though. Why do sense memories sometimes last longer or seem to than other memories?
I think our place where we live is, in its most basic sense, it is a collection of sensory experiences. That's how you experience your place, especially when you're brand new. You see the things around you, you smell things, you taste things, and that's how we form our idea of what our place is. I talk in the book about this concept of building place attachment and building a sense of love for where you live by creating happy memories there, doing things that make you happy. And I think a lot of those revolve around sensory experiences. You know, if I had to move from my town tomorrow, I would definitely miss the ginger cookies at Our Daily Bread, which is the bakery down the street. You know, I would miss this is a very lush place full of green and growing things. And I think I would miss that smell of, you know, earthy plants in spring. I think when we have experiences that are rooted in senses, whether it's, you know, food or tactile things or things that we hear, we do tend to internalize them. They become part of our subconscious memory, and we draw on those things later, so that our places in our mind kind of tend to be related to those sensory experiences.
Yeah. So Miriam said the desert if she moved from Dubai tomorrow. I think for me, I would miss the greenery and the wildlife. We live right outside of a conservation area, and we have deer and all sorts of birds and just all in our backyard. And I know I would miss that. So another one of the things that I really loved in the book, and this was, I'm really obsessed with personality and how that impacts our world. And so when you brought up the ocean concept, I was like, this is such a big thing, and I wanted to talk about it. So you talk about in the book that people that rate highly on openness or agreeability might have an easier time with moving. So how does personality impact our ability to become place attached? And I would love for you to talk about extroverts versus introverts.
Okay. I talk about extroverts versus introverts all the time because I'm a huge introvert. In the book, I describe taking this online personality quiz, and I think my score for extroversion was like a million or something. You know, I was more introverted than most of the population. And I feel like that's something that definitely influences how I integrate into a new community. I have a friend here in Blacksburg named Christy. She moved here a year after I did. And I realized, just kind of watching her and seeing her, that she had like 10 times the friends that I did really quickly, because she's just a huge extrovert. It's really easy for her to talk to people, you know, to approach strangers. I think that skill, that personality trait will, unfortunately for the rest of us introverts, it will make it easier for you to settle in a place, because a lot of our ability to feel at home in a place is based on our connections with other people, our sense of community. And so if you have that that personality, you're outgoing and you get along with everyone, you're agreeable. It makes it easier to make friends in a new place and connect with strangers and sort of build your tribe in your community. That said, I think there are ways that even people who are introverts can build place attachment, and they might be different things. For people who are introverted, that friend component of moving to a new town might take a little time to develop. But you may be more likely to develop deeper relationships with fewer people that you know better. I also think introverts are better at connecting with aspects of place attachment that involve nature. We're maybe a little more likely to spend time communing with nature, taking hikes and things like that. We're, I think, more likely to connect with that sensory aspect of place that we were just talking about, simply because we're a little quieter and we notice it more. Personality is really interesting. One of the people that I interviewed for the book is a researcher named Jason Renfro, who studies person in environment fit and how places kind of have personalities. Like, he did all this research and learned that in the United States, Vermont is the most introverted state. Utah is the most agreeable state. West Virginia is the most neurotic state. It's like every state kind of has its own personality based, of course, on the people who live there. And it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, for instance, the coasts are known for having more open residents, openness kind of being a word for like creative, and you're open to new experiences. And it becomes a thing where those kinds of people want to live by people who are like them. So we sort of gravitate towards certain places. And so sometimes you move to a place and you're just like, this just feels right. And it's because of that. You've sort of found a place that matches your personality. And that can feel really great. But I think the thing to remember is that personality is important when it comes to building place attachment and feeling rooted where you live. But it doesn't have to be the bottom line. Sometimes we say, well, of course I'm not making any friends because I'm really introverted. But I don't think that personality should be an excuse. I think it just means we have to find maybe different ways of approaching feeling in love with our city.
Yeah. So I want to just cover the fact that normally we run 10 minutes, but I think we're going to go over, and because we're only halfway through the things that I want to ask you about.
Right. You got to get these questions in.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do when we move to a new place is I explore like there's no tomorrow. I go everywhere. I check things off the list. I download, I go everywhere. But one of the things you talked about in the book kind of challenged my norm, because you suggested visiting the same place on repeat to kind of develop kind of a cheers reaction, where when you walk in after you visited a place several times, they say, hey, we're glad to have you back. And we've actually done that with our newest move. We've been in our newest location for almost 6 months, and we chose one restaurant that we frequent all of the time. And about a month ago, we walked in and the waitress recognized us and said, hey, and the feeling was crazy. I mean, we've been serial movers forever, and I had never thought to do that. So talk about a little bit about creating familiarity in loving the place where we live.
I love that you did that. In the book, I talk about my own personal experiments with this. I call them love where you live experiments, and things that I do to try and make myself fall in love with my town. And that was one of the things that my husband and I tried to do. We tried to become regulars at a restaurant, and we had this idea that we were going to go in. It was going to be like, cheers. They'd be like, hey, Melody, we're so glad to see you. And we committed to going to this restaurant in our town called Lefties. And one of the reasons for doing that is this idea of a third place. So a third place is, it's not home, it's not work, it's somewhere else, often a restaurant or a bar or a coffee house, someplace where you go and you spend time and you kind of form your own little gathering spot outside of, home and work. And the benefit of that is building a sense of community and building a sense of familiarity, like you mentioned, that part of feeling attached or rooted in a place is knowing what's around you, feeling comfortable and familiar with certain spaces, like these are your places, and being known as well, having people in your community who recognize you, who know your name when you go to the dry cleaner or something like that. So my husband and I made this attempt at this restaurant, Lefties, and realized quickly that it would take us months and months to get that sense of recognition. All the waiters were like these really young college students, and we never sat in the same section twice, so we never had the same waiter. But I still love that idea. One of the things that I learned writing the book is that when you love where you live, you do what's good for it. And one of the things that's really good for places is if you patronize local independent businesses. There's this idea called the local multiplier effect that says that when you shop at locally owned businesses as opposed to big box stores or national chains, 3 times the amount of money continues to circulate locally. So it's incredibly good for your economy, but it's also good for your own sense of well-being. We develop what are kind of these economic friendships with people who work at the coffee house where we go all the time, or the restaurant where the waiter knows you. I think the internet, online shopping, and big box stores have kind of dehumanized commerce, where I know for me, I've been a huge Target and an Amazon shopper for most of my life. And you kind of forget that there are actually people involved in this process, and that people make a living when you shop at their stores. Mm-hmm. So one of my Love Where You Live experiments was to try and commit myself to shopping more locally. And I'm pretty realistic about it. I don't think that people generally can probably completely rule out big box stores in their lives. But the idea is to shift a little of your spending to local businesses. So I did that with a local toy store in our town. It's down the street from us. It's called Imaginations. And because I've done that, I've gotten to know the lady who owns it. Her name is Paula Bolte. And I go into that store and she comes out from behind the counter and she gives me a hug. And she talks to my daughters and, she asks what we're shopping for and she gives a suggestion. And I have never had a relationship like that before. And I really like it. I love that sense of having someone know me simply because I'm supporting their business.
Yeah, that's really great. We've had a bunch of people join us just in the last couple of minutes, so I wanted to pop that question up again for a chance to win one of Melody's books. This is Where You Belong. Just answer in the comments, what would you miss if you moved from your current location tomorrow? And actually, that's a question that probably is something that we actually do deal with as Triangles, is sometimes you get that call that says you are moving. But answer that question in the comments and we'll do a drawing at the end. Melody, something that I'm very passionate about is volunteering and giving back. And you talk a lot about that as one of your experiments as well, that when we do good for the places that we live, that helps us with our place attachment and our maybe the quickness that we can fall in love with where we live. So let's talk a little bit about that. Our community doesn't often stay in one place for very long, so we also could talk a little bit about short-term opportunities to do something good for the places that we live.
I think that volunteering and doing good for where you live is such a powerful way to build place attachment and build community, because it gives you a sense of ownership over your town, that you're not just there waiting for people to, bestow their services on you or make your life better, that you are taking control of the situation, that you are going to make improvements and change things that you don't like about your town. I think there is a movement toward that kind of attitude, that, a lot more people want to be part of shaping their town and making it better. And volunteering is a great way to do that. So when I move to a new town, I always kind of keep my eye out for formal volunteer opportunities. And often we find them at places that we naturally gravitate toward and love. Here in my town in Blacksburg, I started volunteering at the local historic movie theater because I went there, and saw movies there, and it helped me feel a sense of community. Sometimes where we volunteer is more determined by the things that make us sad in our community, the poverty or the homelessness or whatever, and we find ways to connect with that. Right. But you mentioned short-term opportunities. I don't think that we should create an idea for ourselves that we have to volunteer formally at a nonprofit or, in some really organized fashion. A lot of what we're talking about here about making our places better can simply be little actions that we do. One of the people that I write about in the book that I loved interviewing was a woman named Jen Prod. She lives in Minneapolis, and she hadn't lived there very long when she decided to do what she called random acts of happiness.
Yes.
So she just picked fun things that would be a way to sort of give back and interact with her community. So one day she baked a cake, and she went down to the local, park with a friend, and she just gave out free slices of cake. She printed out jokes and went to downtown Minneapolis and taped them on the wall, these terrible, puns and things like that. And right, people on their lunch break started following her around because they wanted to see what the next joke was. She took hula hoops downtown and held an impromptu hula hooping competition. She taped candy on the inside of the bus stop. So she did all these things totally, she didn't ask for permission. She didn't get permits. She didn't sign up with anyone. She just kind of created opportunities for herself to do good in a way that, helped her connect with people around her. I did that, something similar here with my daughters. On my birthday a few years ago, we did random acts of kindness, took donuts to the fire department and left a cooler full of water bottles on the running trail. And there's a sense of power that comes from that. When you're new in a community, you can feel very lost and anonymous and overwhelmed. No one knows who I am. I'm barely getting my bearings. Doing these acts of reaching out, whether, it's for fun or for the sake of kindness, help you feel like you're exerting an influence on where you live. You are making something happen. And that can help you build that sense of place that makes you feel rooted.
I like that. And I think that goes right along with that piece of it, that sometimes when we say, well, I'm only going to be here for 2 years, or I already know that this post ends in 3 years. Sometimes I think we can just kind of go, it's okay. I don't have anything to give. But those small acts of kindness, I can envision a lot of our members doing some of that stuff, just in a fun way and just in a way to connect with the place that you live. Something else that you said, and I'm trying to remember if this was in your book or if I heard it somewhere else. Did you talk about the turquoise bench?
I didn't talk about it in the book, but I've written about it since then. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I keep freezing on the screen, but one of the other things I had recently found was about the turquoise bench, and this woman painted a bench, and she painted it turquoise, and it's in her front yard. And I think that sometimes, if anybody knows resilience and knows what it is to connect with others, it's triangles, people who have lived this lifestyle. And I think that if we just keep in mind, we have something to give others. You know, it's not always about waiting for the people to come to us, but us putting themselves in that situation. I think that's important also.
I have a friend named Kathy whose husband is in the Foreign Service, and they move every 3 years. They're in, I think, Indonesia right now. And she has developed this talent for just, she gets to a new place, you know, she has 5 kids, I think, and she just goes for it. You know, there's no part of her that's waiting to be invited to participate in anything. She just gets involved. You know, she starts volunteering. She invites people over for dinner. And I just really admire that approach. The challenge is the more rooted you become where you live, the harder it is to move. You know, like when you get that call in 2 or 3 years that says it's time to go to the next place, you've created this community of friends and, you know, relationships and influence that now you have to leave behind. And that's really tough. But my take on that is, you know, it's like falling in love, or, you know, starting a family. You know that there is a chance that that loved one is going to leave you, and that will be really difficult. But we shouldn't let that stop us from forming those relationships in the first place. So I love seeing people who know that they're only going to be in a place for, you know, a year or 6 months, just dig down and make themselves part of that community, try to fall in love with it, see what it's good at, and enjoy those things. I think life is too short to be temporary anywhere. You know, become part of the community.
Yeah, I just posted last week on Instagram a photo of our last house on the day it closed. And I said that it's important to love hard and dig deep and to go all in a place, because the memories, the friendships, the connections that come from digging in deep and loving really hard that place that you're living, you can't replace that. And it does hurt. It does hurt to leave, but I think you're richer for it while you're there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So what's something, actually, we've got a couple of comments here. Jill says she would miss the amazing views of the mountains and the climate. Yes, she's a nature lover. And then we have Tracy who says friends, which is just what we were talking about.
Right.
That is the hard thing.
That's a hard thing. Right. It is hard.
And Allison said she would miss the forest and the nature that's on her doorstep and the freedom of movement throughout Europe. So that's actually a really good point. Sometimes I think that the things that we can fall in love with and that we would miss aren't always people or things, but it's freedom or lack of, depending on where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. You know, and I think every place is made up of, you know, the larger culture of that place. And sometimes those are things that we don't realize we even have until, you know, we've moved on to the next place and left them behind.
Right. What are some of the things that you found come up for you after you wrote the book and published it? And then as you've been meeting with people and sharing the news about your book and traveling, has anything surprised you about reactions to the book or reactions to the concept of this, loving where you live?
One of the things that's been really gratifying is to see people actually take this for what it's meant to be, which is a tool, and apply it to their lives. Mm-hmm. I wrote the book to be very, you know, kind of hands-on. I'm a magazine writer traditionally, and you know, would write stories for magazines that were full of tips. And I think that carried over into the book. The end of every chapter is a checklist with ideas that you can do. And so I've really loved hearing from people who say, I've been in this place for a while and I don't love it, but your ideas and your checklist give me things to do, and
Mm.
give me a sense of, action and control, that there are things that I can do to change how I feel about where I live. But one of the things that has surprised me, I think, going into writing the book, I really thought that, if you are rooted and you're attached, you are just going to commit to one place and be there, and that's your place, and you're not moving anymore. I kind of felt that moving to Blacksburg, like, if I'm going to be rooted, we're here forever. And it surprised me how many people I've met or talked to who have several places like that. Someone just emailed me this week that has lived in a community in upstate New York that they don't love, but they have a lot of ties to. Part of the community and have family nearby. But there was another town within an hour that she really felt drawn to. So they bought an apartment in the new town and they kept their house in the first town, and they're kind of splitting their time. And it works really well for them. It allows her to, on the weekends go to the new town and kind of enjoy this match with her personality, but still maintain all her connections in the old town. And I imagine that a lot of triangles have that, having moved around the world, you may have multiple cities that really speak to you and that you kind of have left part of your heart in. And I am learning as I go along that that's still rootedness. You can be attached to multiple places, that we as humans are, we are filled with multitudes, and we have places that speak to different parts of our personalities. And you can feel rooted in lots of different places, and that's good.
And I think it's interesting too, we have realized with our kids, their connection to a place changes as they grow also. So where we, 5 years ago, the connection may have been really solidly with one place, but then as we move and as they grow up, as they change and mature a little bit, and I wonder if that's similar for adults too. And when at the very beginning, you made the comment that in a new place, you can reinvent yourself. And I know that that is something that all of the triangles can nod their head. Mm-hmm. It's either a good or a bad thing. But you can really show up in a new place as a new person. And I wonder if that has something to do too with your connection to a place. I don't know if that might be something to ponder for everybody.
Yeah, my husband moved around a lot when he was a kid. And when we moved to Austin, he told our older daughter, who was then about to start third grade, one of the great things about moving is that you can just reinvent yourself. You can be a new person. And she took that deeply to heart, and she became this really strong tomboy when we...
Interesting.
She just decided, this is who I am now. I'm going to wear boy clothes. I'm going to hang out with boys. And when we moved again, a couple years later, she was done with that. And she became a girl again in Blacksburg. So I think we can reinvent ourselves, and we sort of create who we are in each of the new places. And so sometimes that changes over time too. If you've been in a place for a while, this town that may have worked really well when your kids were young now might not be such a great fit, and it might feel like it's time to move on to someplace else. I hope that the message of the book is that no matter where you are and how you feel about it, you can make choices with your attitude and your behavior that will make you feel better, that will make you feel happier. But I do also acknowledge that not every place is the best fit for everyone. And sometimes life takes you in new places. So the final note of the book is, for however long you're there, find joy. You don't have to be there permanently. It doesn't have to be your forever home, but you can experience joy, even if you're there only temporarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that. Annabelle says she would miss the child rearing philosophy of Germany the most. And we need to say hi to Alfredo and also Brittany, who says she still misses Blacksburg.
Yep. Who used to live here, and it's hard to leave.
Yes. So as we start to wrap up, I could talk to you about this really all day long. I really enjoyed the book. I listened to it first audio, and then I read it just because I wanted to get a different feel. And I think one of the things that I really loved the most about it, and what I would encourage the Triangles to do, is pick it up at your library, order a copy, put it in your hands, because the tips, what do you call them at the end of every chapter?
The A Love Where You Live checklist.
Yes, thank you. That really brought it down, because you have a lot of stats, you have a lot of research, and then you have a lot of just really practical ways that you can get nuggets from. And I actually talked to a friend that I have only met in real life twice, but we've known each other for years through the internet. And she's living in a place that she doesn't like. She's not happy. She's not settled. And we talked about that sometimes you just need a little suggestion. Today, try this. Right. Tomorrow, try this. And so I really appreciated that in your book, that you could almost open your book to the end of a chapter and have an actionable item to go try and go test out. And I thought that was great.
Thanks. Yeah. I wanted to, I wrote it as a person who didn't love where I lived and wanted to change that for myself. And so I hope that it's helpful for people in that same boat who, may be sort of lukewarm about where they live, or may not be sure, people who may be new and trying to find their place in a community. I wanted to give people practical ways to make themselves feel happier. And people always ask me, did it work? And it did. Yeah, that may be a spoiler for the book, but going into it, I really wasn't sure how effective it would be, taking what science tells us about what creates place attachment and sort of applying it to my life. But it really did work. We've been here almost 5 years now, and I love it. We're house hunting. We plan to stay for as long as it works. And, that may not be forever, but we're really happy here right now, which is great.
I love it. So where can people find you? I've got your website up. Is that the best place for people to track you down?
Yeah, absolutely. The website is just my name, melodywarnick.com. You can buy the book wherever books are sold. It's available online, hopefully at some of your local bookstores as well. And if you go to the website, there are links to buy it at various places as well.
Perfect. And I just put up a link, but it's a bad one, so I'll have to go edit that. There's also, for anyone who visits, a really great set of reader's guide questions that really help you dig in a little bit to the book. So we're going to do a giveaway, except I can't see easily all of the comments. So as soon as we're done with the live broadcast, we'll go through and Melody will, at random, pick winners. This is your last chance to enter. Tell us in the comments what you would miss if you moved tomorrow. If you are overseas, you will get a digital copy. If you are in the US, it will be a hardback, and we're giving away 4 total. Is that right, Melody?
Yep, that is right.
Okay, cool. All right, so as we finish up, thank you so much, Melody, for being here. I really love the book, and I think that it's an important thing for all of us to research about ourselves, and know that it's a personal thing for everyone. It's, what I appreciated about your experience is that it's not one size fits all, and we each need to find a comfort zone. But I think the challenge is to step outside of wherever that comfort zone is, to always do one more step to try and love the place that you live.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to wrap up for now. Take advantage of the resources that are on Melody's website, and maybe we'll have another chat about this in the Triangle group around loving where you live. See if we can't have some more dialogue.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you, Naomi.
It was indeed. Thank you, Melody. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
All right. Bye.